After looking at the doll, Bo started barking again. Milan followed him back to his bed. It seemed like he was trying to tell her something, so she lifted up his bed. There was nothing there. Then she started to look under the bed, but she couldn't find anything. After looking everywhere, she finally found a small hole dug out near the corner of the room. The hole was so small that it could only fit a tiny thing like a wire. Curious, she got some tools and started to dig through the wall. Milan was born and raised in a small village in China. Her father passed away a few years ago, and since then her mother has been alone with her younger sister to take care of. So after graduating high school, she left her hometown and moved to the bustling city of Shanghai, all by herself in search of a job, so she could send money back to her mother and sister. Although she was just an ordinary girl, her personality was very sweet. She was honest, kind, and helpful. Wherever she went, people would like her very much. Soon she found a job at a toy shop. She liked that job very much because she liked toys a lot. Among them, she liked dolls the most. Because she worked at the toy shop, she would often get her favorite dolls at a discount. So her house was filled with many unique dolls from various countries. She liked them very much and would often hug them and talk to them. She also had a dog named Bo. It was a small dog that always stayed by her side. They were very affectionate. And when Milan came back home every day after work, Bo would always be very happy and wag his tail and act cute. Milan would also play with Bo and give him some toys. They were very happy together. One day a new toy shipment arrived at the store which included a set of limited edition Labubu dolls. They were all very beautiful and well made, but they were also very expensive. As soon as they came, they were all sold out, except for one. When Milan saw them, she had already kept one of them aside. She brought it home. It was golden in color, a shade completely different from the other dolls. The doll was very beautiful, but among all of its features, its smile was the cutest smile Milan had ever seen. She was very happy to have it and kept it on her shelf. Every day, before going to bed, she would come over and admire it. Its lovely blue eyes, golden-colored body, long ears, and sweet smile. Milan also took it into her bed and hugged it tightly and clicked lots of pictures and introduced it as the new member of the doll family to her dog, Boo! But while Boo wagged his tail happily whenever he saw the other dolls. This time when he saw the Labubu doll, he barked and growled loudly. At first Milan thought maybe it was just because the doll looked a bit scary. But the next morning, before leaving for work, Boo barked furiously at the Labubu doll again. Just as Milan was about to leave the house, he grabbed her jeans and pulled her toward the shelf. At first, Milan didn't understand what he was trying to do, so she followed him back to his bed. It seemed like he was trying to tell her something, so she lifted up his bed. There was nothing there. Then she started to look under the bed, but she couldn't find anything. After looking everywhere, she finally found a small hole dug out near the corner of the room. The hole was so small that it could only fit a tiny thing like a wire. Curious, she got some tools and started to dig through the wall. At first, she didn't think much of it. She just wanted to see where the hole led to. But soon her eyes widened. In front of her was a dark passage that seemed to go on forever. She hesitated for a moment, but her curiosity got the better of her, so she went inside. The tunnel was very narrow, so she had to bend down and move forward. The air inside was musty and stale, and she couldn't help but feel a sense of unease as she made her way deeper and deeper into the darkness. As she walked further into the tunnel, she began to hear strange noises. At first, they were faint and distant, but as she got closer to the end of the passage, they became louder and more distorted. She couldn't quite make out what the sounds were, but they seemed to be coming from the other side of the wall. She pressed on, her heart pounding in her chest. Finally, the tunnel opened up into a small chamber, and as her eyes adjusted to the dim light, she saw something that made her gasp in surprise. In the center of the room was a large, ornate wooden box. It was intricately carved with images of mythical creatures and ancient symbols. But what really caught her attention was the faint glow that seemed to emanate from within the box. She cautiously approached the box and reached out a hand to touch it. As soon as her fingers made contact with the wood, the glow intensified, and the lid of the box creaked open. She gasped and pulled her hand back, but it was too late. The lid swung open, revealing a swirling vortex of energy. Before she could react, she was sucked into the box, and everything went black. Milan found herself lying on the ground in a dark and unfamiliar place. She sat up and looked around. She realized that she was in a dark and dank underground chamber. The walls were covered in moss, and the air was thick with the smell of decay. She struggled to her feet and began to explore her surroundings. As she made her way through the chamber, she noticed strange markings on the walls. They looked like ancient hieroglyphics, but she couldn't decipher their meaning. Suddenly, she heard a noise behind her, and she whirled around to face whatever was making the sound. But she didn't see anything. The chamber was empty except for her. She continued exploring and eventually came across a narrow passageway. She stepped inside and found herself descending a steep staircase. As she made her way down the stairs, she heard the sound of dripping water and the faintest whisper that seemed to echo through the darkness. At the bottom of the stairs, she found herself in a large cavern. The center of the cavern was a pool of water, and the sound of dripping water was coming from the ceiling. Above the pool, there was a crack in the ceiling through which water was seeping in. She approached the pool and looked at her reflection. She was shocked by what she saw. Her face was pale and her eyes were glowing an eerie green. She reached out a hand to touch the water, and as her fingers made contact, she felt a jolt of energy surge through her body. She stumbled back and fell to her knees. She looked up at the crack in the ceiling and saw a faint glow emanating from within. She realized that the water in the pool was glowing too. It was a soft, ethereal light that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. She stood up and walked toward the pool, drawn to the light. As she reached out to touch it, she felt another surge of energy, and her vision went black. When Milan regained consciousness, she found herself back in her own bedroom. She sat up and looked around. Everything seemed normal. The walls were a familiar white, and the curtains were drawn, letting in a soft light from outside. She looked down at her body and saw that she was wearing the same clothes as before. Had it all been a dream? She wasn't sure. She tried to piece together what had happened, but everything seemed so fragmented and surreal. Was she still in Shanghai, or had she been transported somewhere else? What was the meaning of the box, the cavern, and the glowing water? She got up and walked to the window. She looked out onto the street. She noticed something strange. The buildings and streets looked different. The cars were more advanced and the people were dressed in strange clothes. She turned back to the mirror and looked at herself again. Her face was no longer pale and her eyes were no longer glowing green. But as she stared at her reflection, she noticed something strange. Her eyes were a faint green, almost like a reflection of the world she had just left behind. Suddenly, she heard a knock on the door, and she quickly turned away from the mirror. She didn't know who could be visiting her at this hour, but she couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. She slowly approached the door and reached out a hand to open it. As the door swung open, she gasped in surprise. Standing in front of her was a man she had never seen before. He was tall and handsome, with piercing blue eyes and skin that seemed to glow with an otherworldly light. The man gestured for her to follow him, and without hesitation, she stepped into the cavern and disappeared from sight.